Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Huge shout out and special thanks to the channel members. The manhwa starts with a man saying that he knows that name very well. And we start to get a description of the man. He's uncontrollable, a swordmaster who never wants to leave his room, and he's a man out of his mind. He is Count Predium's useless oldest son, Gisline Predium. We see the man that he is fighting asking how he, the best knight of the north, was defeated by that garbage human being. And Gisline asks him if he finds it warm and cozy, saying he put a lot of money into making that trap. Bro has a cold ass walkout, and he glares at him, asking if he likes it. His enemy says there's no way he's the garbage Gisline, asking him how he knew of his plans beforehand. Gisline says not just that, he also knew how many of them there were, who the spies were, and who helped him with the reinforcements. He knew everything from the start, and he played in the palm of his hand. The man gets angry, saying there's no way, and he's always been a hidden ace card, asking how could a useless piece of shit like him dare to mess with him. But he gets interrupted by getting kicked straight in the face as Gisline tells him to shut it. He says to try invading however many times you want, he's going to be the one to win the war after that, every single time without fail. He takes off his helmet and asks if he knows why that is. He says it's because he has all of the plans. It jumps to a year ago in the Luthania kingdom near the Predium estate. Gisline is looking at his hand all shaky and asks what just happened. He reaches for his throat, surprised that he's alive. He says there's no way, just a while ago, he was killed. We see his sword get sent flying through the air mid-combat by his enemy. He says shit, and we see him get cut straight across the chest like Zorro, but he was already bleeding pretty heavily. He falls to his knees, and a red-haired knight says this is how it ends. Gisline Predium, the mercenary king and one of the continent's 7 strongest men, has lost to none other than one of the continent's top 7 noble knights named Idun. He says the war is over, and he asks Gisline if he has any last words. Gisline says none, it's just a shame that he was unable to fulfill his revenge and wishes that Idun would just die here. Idun sighs, calling him arrogant, saying that he didn't expect him to have been the oldest son of the fallen Predium household though, and that he recalls him leaving his family after his sister died. Gisline asks how he knows that when he's from a different kingdom. Idun says of course he knows that because he worked his ass off to try to track him down because they were the ones who worked with the Delphian household to bring down his family. Gisline hears the words we and realizes there were other people besides the Duke Delphian's household that planned his downfall. Idun puts his blade to his throat, saying there's no point explaining to him further since he's going to be dead soon and that he should just accept his fate. Gisline yells, calling him a bastard, saying that he'll never forgive him, and Idun says he doesn't care and then swings his sword, cutting Gisline's head clean off, causing his blood to go flying through the air. Gisline explains that he was decapitated at that moment, yet here he is with his head still on his shoulders. He wonders if that was all a hallucination as he is his younger self. He wonders if maybe he was taken captive and uses a lab rat for the mages. These arrogant bastards will regret having kept him alive. Somebody calls out to him, calling him young master, and Gisline turns, and we are introduced to one of the Predium soldiers named Ricardo, who says that he needs Gisline to come out because he knows he's awake. Gisline instantly tells him to just be quiet and puts his blade to his throat, saying he'll let him live if he answers his questions or maybe not, and he begins to release killing intent. Ricardo is confused, asking him what's going on, saying this is crossing a line and that no means no, and sighs. Gisline wonders what's the deal with his reaction since he's being threatened, asking what he's talking about. Ricardo pushes him away, saying he tired himself out from his tantrum earlier and fell asleep. Gisline asks what he's talking about, and Ricardo asks him if he forgot everything after taking a nap, saying that he was throwing a tantrum about how he was going to command the group to raid the orcs. Gisline is confused, asking what kind of nonsense this is, and Ricardo says that he needs to get his shit together as people are waiting on them. Gisline asks where they are going, and Ricardo says, of course, to the Predium estate. Gisline is surprised by this and grabs Ricardo's shoulder, telling him to say that again. Ricardo asks what's wrong, but Gisline presses him further, asking if he means the fallen Predium estate. At the top of the cliff, we see Gisline looking over at the Predium estate. Gisline is surprised, saying it really is his house, and he wonders how it's still standing, as he saw it reduced to ashes in the past. Ricardo asks him if he had a nightmare or something, saying that if he calls his own household fallen it's too much, and he will get kicked out if the count hears that. Gisline pinches his cheek, asking if he is dreaming, but says that shit hurts, so never mind. He has a younger face, and his estate is in its original state. That means he has traveled back to the past or perhaps an alternate timeline. His younger self resented the household, and his immaturity was born from feeling inferior, and as more time passed, more people from the household avoided him. He was unable to withstand the criticism and ran away from home. Several years after that, he became a mercenary. He survived countless battles, building up his skills and made a name for himself. He returned to the Perdiem country in order to make up for his past mistakes. But all he had waiting for him was the remains of his family's household, and he lost everything. But right now, it's still all here. All the people he holds dear are still alive as well. He begins to smile, saying he can't believe it, and he wants to sing a song of joy. But it's too early to rejoice. He recalls Ricardo mentioning the raid about the orcs, and he can't forget that day. This is the day that most people in the raid squad will die brutally to the orcs. In his past life, he had followed the orc raid squad in an attempt to make a name for himself. Insert Gambit meme. At that time, the report said there were only 3 orcs. He thought that would be easy enough for somebody like him who had no experience commanding a squad. But when they got there were more than 20 orcs. Almost everybody ended up dying because he had been stubborn and wanted to command them all. It should be doable enough since these orcs didn't really have a strategy. The problem is if these guys will trust him since they all think he's a useless bastard. We then hear something being thrown overhead, as one of their defense fortresses just got sent flying across the ground in front of him, and some soldiers scream that it's the orcs and that they are here. As we see the giant reddish orcs charging straight in. Gisline asks if they got here this fast in his past life too. The orcs are absolutely bodying them. I do not see them winning this. Plot armor needs to kick in because bro is about to die again in his second life. A man yells in a panic saying everybody needs to get into formation, and that they don't need to panic. Kind of ironic. He is the raid squad commander named Skoven. An orc swings his blade at him, and Skoven manages to avoid it narrowly. He says that they let their guard down, and getting ambushed was something they weren't prepared for. There are way more of them than was reported too, and at this rate, they are all going to die. Gisline calls out to him, and Skoven turns confused, and he tells him that he needs to watch behind as an orc is coming in for a surprise attack. Gisline quickly dashes in, heading straight towards Skoven, putting his arm on his shoulder, and he throws him out of the way of the attack. Skoven is confused, and he wonders why Gisline is sacrificing himself for him. But he is mistaken, as Gisline stabs his blade straight in through the orc's hand, cutting its arm and leg clean in half. Everybody is speechless as the orc lets out a scream and falls to the floor, crushing the ground beneath it due to its size. Gisline cleans his blade from the blood, saying that he guesses he can't use mana and he wishes he had returned to the past earlier. He walks over to Skoven asking if he is the commander. Skoven is just confused, and Gisline tells him to give it. Skoven asks what he is talking about, and Gisline says he wants to have the commander rights. Skoven wonders what he means by the right to command, saying that he knows he's an idiot, but to ask for this when everybody's lives are on the line is too much. He stands up, telling Gisline that he can't. He walks away, asking if he thinks this is some kind of game, saying even if he is the young master, he cannot give up the authority that the Lord gave him that easily. Gisline says this is annoying, although he would have reacted the same way if an idiot came up to him and asked for the right to command. Another orc comes in to avenge his fallen brother, and Skoven tells him to fall back, as he will take care of things. Did bro just forget what just happened? Gisline says he has no choice, as he raises his sword and then throws it, almost hitting Skoven in the back. Skoven asks him what he thinks he's doing, grabbing him by the collar. He then hears the sound of something getting stabbed behind him, and he stops yelling for a second and turns, wondering what that was, as he sees an orc with the sword straight through its forehead, towering above him. The orc starts to grunt and then falls backward, dead onto the floor. Skoven is confused, wondering how he hit his weak spot. Gisline asks him if he knows what's the most important thing in battle. We see all the men afraid of the orcs' battle cries, hiding behind their shields. Gisline says there's no hope in winning a battle when their troops are filled with fear, and they have to gain momentum to win. Gisline pulls his blade out of the orc's head, running in. He dashes through the debris of the tower and leaps through the air straight above the orcs that are charging into his allies. He lands, stabbing one of the orcs straight through the head in front of everybody. Skoven can't believe what he is seeing. Gisline pulls out his blade, telling the orcs to come at him. As he's stepping on the head of one, he says that he'll kill them all. They start to charge at him, but he does the same thing. The first one gets his arm cut off by Gisline, and then Gisline quickly dashes around him towards the next two. He dodges the swing of one and returns by striking them both in the chest, eventually cutting their heads off, as one is seen by Skoven. Skoven, who wonders if he is dreaming, as even a mana user like himself finds it hard to do anything. So how is a skinny young man doing all of this? We see Gisline gassed out. He says that he can clearly see he's tired. However, he's using the smallest of movements to dodge attacks and using his swordsmanship to strike at their weak spots. Like a mana-less swordsmaster. Or perhaps even something greater. Gisline yells, asking if this is all they have, saying he's not even warmed up yet, and they're not living up to their reputation as a warrior species, as he starts to turn. The soldiers realize that they're all charging at Gisline and wonder if he's running away. The men then call out to Skoven, who stands there, lost in thought, as he can't tell what Gisline is thinking. Drawing their attention was great, but running away now, in that direction, he recognizes it as the edge of a cliff towards the Perdium estate. He then thinks about it, and the fact that it's a cliff, and begins to sweat nervously, saying there is no way. He yells at all of his men to raise a shield wall, as they'll follow the first son into battle. As all of the orcs are charging straight behind Gisline, he says that he's sure Skoven has already realized what his plans are, if he's a skilled commander. Although he would prefer to slice all of them down by himself, his shitty stamina won't be able to handle any of that. But this should be enough for Skoven to handle, as he smirks. As all the orcs are keeping Gisline at the edge of the cliff, they hear the sound of charging behind, and they all turn, wondering what it is. Only to see Skoven and the boys pulling up with their shields and spears. Gisline grins, saying this is perfect. He jumps backward off of the cliff, saying now is the time. Skoven yells, telling the troops to push them off the cliff, and they begin to charge at them while they have nowhere to go. They make contact with the orcs, and the men start to scream, pushing with all of their might. The orcs actually do end up falling off. As we see Gisline has stuck his sword into the cliff, the orcs all hit the ground, dying from fall damage. Should have had a water bucket. All the men are gassed out, saying that they actually managed to kill all the orcs. When Skoven yells, calling out for Gisline, he looks over the edge to see him still holding on to the wall. Gisline grins, but Skoven didn't expect him to be alive and then begins to smile, and reaches his hand at Gisline, telling him to grab for it. But Gisline releases his sword, saying that he can't, and he begins to lose strength in his hand as he falls down the cliff. Skoven did not expect this, neither did I. While Gisline is dreaming, he hears a little girl calling out to him. We learn that it is his sister, Elena, and he starts to think about his memories with her, and then thanking him. But eventually, their relationship turned bad, as his attitude grew worse and worse. She eventually grew to loathe him. He sees them as fragments, and he holds onto one, saying these are his memories of Elena. He then hears her grabbing onto him as she pulls his arm, and she says that they should go together with tears in her eyes. And his eyes then open wide, and he looks up at his ceiling, realizing that he is back indoors. He looks at his hands, saying it looks like they actually managed to save him, and he wonders what that weird dream was. And he begins to feel severe DOMs all over his body. He says that it must be a consequence of pushing his body to the limit, but he guesses it makes it easier for him to know that he is still alive. A woman then opens the door, calling out to him, saying that he is awake. She seems happy. She has a bucket of water with her. We learn that her name is Belinda. She lets out a sigh, asking if he knows how worried she was, saying that she told him that he should have let the soldiers handle the orcs. He jumps out of bed, hugging her tightly. And she asks what he's doing, and if she did something wrong. He says no, that he's just glad to see her. We learn that she was his personal tutor. Since he was little, she was the only one who continued to stay by his side despite his idiotic antics. But after his family fell into ruin, and she went missing, he never saw her ever again, and he never expected to see her like this. She wonders what he's so happy about when they see each other every day, and he realizes he needs to tell her the truth, so he tells her that a catastrophe will soon strike Perdium. She wonders what he is saying, and he says the truth is that he died and came back to life. In a sarcastic tone, she says sure, and she's sure the orcs almost killed him. He tries to explain it to her, but she says that he, rather than Perdium, is in greater danger. She continues to bark at him, and he says he guesses this isn't going to work. She asks him what he was going to do if he were to be too hurt to go to the festival. He then starts to recall it, and she asks if he's already forgotten, saying that Lady Elena has been waiting for the day to go to the festival with him. It'd be a great chance for the two of them to become close to each other again. He says he now remembers the festival that always happened around this time of year, and he holds up a picture of him and his sister, and he says in his past life he didn't have time to enjoy these because of his traumatic experience, and he asks how long it is until the festival. Belinda thinks about it, saying that he has about a week left, and he can't believe that it's so close. His sister asks if he's inside, and she begins to enter. He says the day is soon coming that changed his life, as it's a memory that continues to haunt him, as when he looks over, we actually learn that it is an event that will lead to his sister's death. Gisline quickly hugs Elena, and even Belinda is surprised. Elena starts to get flustered, asking him what kind of prank this is, and he tells her that he's missed her. She shoves him away, saying that he's creeping her out, and he can't believe how strong she is. She says that Belinda asked her to come here, wondering what kind of game he's playing, asking if he thinks this makes everything okay. He says he has no idea what she's talking about, and she mentions that he told her to piss off because she's annoying and that he thinks she's disgusting too. He can't believe he said all of that. He explains that he wasn't the closest with her in his past life and admits he was a complete piece of shit. He apologizes to her, and both Belinda and Elena can't believe that he apologized first. They ask Gisline if the orcs hurt his head, and he says no. He dealt with them himself, asking why they keep implying that it was him who got hit. His doms then come back, and he falls to the floor. In a sarcastic tone, Elena says, "Yeah, right, you totally dealt with them," and both she and Belinda start laughing. He can't believe they're having such a wholesome moment. He smiles, saying everybody's the same as he remembers them. He wonders why the past him wasted so much time on useless things. The festival that comes next week, he had rejected Elena's offer to go together, making an excuse that the events from the raid squad made him upset, and that was the last time he ever saw her. Her body was then found shredded to pieces along with her guards, and he regretted that moment every day for the rest of his life. Someone knocks, asking if they can come in, and it's Elena's guards, named Jamal and Philip. She asks why they came in, saying she told them to wait outside. Jamal says he's sorry, but the servants asked her to oversee their work on the festival supplies. Gisline asks why they would even need Elena for that, and Belinda says that he wouldn't know because he's always lazy. She asks if he knows that there's a shortage of workers. He asks if it's low enough that even Elena would need to work right now. He didn't take care of these things back then, so it's obvious that he wouldn't know. He tells his sister he would like to help her. She looks back at him in disbelief, and both she and Belinda are shocked. Outside, we see multiple vendors set up for the festival. Gisline is yelling, saying that he said he'd help. Elena tells him to go away, as people will be too scared to work with him around. She shoves him away, and he asks if this is really how she should treat someone wanting to help. He explains that her body was found near the slums, far from the festival grounds, and somebody must have called her out there or forcibly moved her there. To prevent that, he needs to know the ins and outs of the castle. A man quickly runs over, calling out to Gisline. Gisline is surprised, and we learn that it is a knight named Fergus. He says that this lowly servant of his made his way over to him as soon as he heard about the news of the orcs. He begins to cry, and Gisline says they can stop talking about it now. Elena laughs, saying great timing, and that he's acting weird after waking up, and she would like Fergus to take Gisline back to his room. He says as she wishes. Gisline says it can't be helped and he'll get to know what's going on around the castle better the following week. He mentions an abandoned training field in the castle, telling Fergus to take him there. Fergus asks for what reason, and Gisline says to train, asking what other reason he would need. Fergus is surprised and quickly guides him over. When Gisline is there, he can't believe how good of a condition it is for being abandoned and that it's a perfectly suitable location for him to train at, and he never saw anything like this as a mercenary. Fergus says they kept it maintained in case he ever wished to use it, and he's certain what he's going through is just a phase of not wanting to train. Gisline wonders if Fergus took this much care of it in his past life too, and he begins to truly regret how he acted. He tells Fergus that he needs to live a long old life as dying is hella painful. Fergus says it sounds like he's already experienced death, and Gisline says as expected, he's sharp and he actually did die and resurrect. Fergus thinks he did suffer brain damage. Gisline then says he can head back, and he's going to start training, and Fergus tells him that he'll just wait outside. Gisline always treated everybody around him like they were his enemies, but he was just short-sighted, and he thinks about how he only has a week to prepare. Back then, it was revealed that the one behind Elena's death was a lord from a neighboring territory. Thanks to that, Predium got caught up in a war that led to its downfall. Her death was essentially the starting point of his house's end. That means he needs to get things straight from here on out. First things first, he needs to get his physique better. It sucks that he doesn't have a lot of time, but he should be able to at least control mana. Mana is a supernatural resource that allows humans to break through their limits. Most people say that noticing and taking in the mana is the hardest part, but he was able to do that even on the battlefield. He has to connect the mana particles floating in the air and bundle it up as if he is spinning a spool. For someone like him who has experienced thousands, no tens of thousands of battles, creating a mana core is a piece of cake. But if it was just that, he couldn't have been part of the strongest 7 in the land. Without the method from that half-burned book he found and the natural mana core of humans, he can actually surpass their innate limit by creating a second core and even a third, stacking them atop one another, creating a connected mesh of multiple cores to create an explosive force from his body. His nose begins to bleed, and so does his mouth, and he says that 3 is his limit. We learn that he actually achieved 5 in his past life. This method allows one to create an explosive force in a short time, but it also requires an extremely large amount of mana in return. That was the primary reason he lost to Idun in his past life, bringing a whole Night Order to fight against him when he had already run out of mana, left him with nothing to do in retaliation, and he definitely would have won if it was a fair fight. Copium. He says it is an inherently unstable technique, but this is enough for now, and he has a youthful body and a lot of time, and he will make sure to enact revenge on Idun. Even those bastards standing behind House Delphine who helped destroy his country, he vows to get revenge on every single one of them. It jumps to a week later to the day of the festival as there are fireworks in the sky. Gisline is putting on his belt and even putting some stuff into his belt pockets, and he starts heading to the festival to meet with his sister. She is surprised that he actually came and asked what happened, saying he never used to do these sorts of things. He says as a per diem, he should at least come to festivals every once in a while. She tells him that he has been acting really weird recently, and she has heard that he has done nothing but training for the past week. He asks what is so wrong about the next in line of a knight family to be training. She is confused, saying that he didn't care about these kinds of things just the other week and he was the one that said Dad was annoying and that he wished he was the Lord already. She laughs, saying that she likes the way things are now, and it seems like the old him is back, and she smiles brightly. Gisline looks over at her and says that he realized something in the past week. Because his actions have changed, his perception of the future is slowly beginning to change as well. The general flow of things might be the same, but it is difficult to gauge the impact of his actions on small events. Some butterfly effect type shit. Making good use of the information from the future is his job, and he needs to respond to each situation effectively. His preparations are now complete, so he starts to enjoy his night at the festival with his sister. We see them trying some bread, and then she carries him to the next stall. This probably happened quite a few times, and then finally, she says that was a lot of fun. But it's getting a little boring with it being the same every year, asking why there's nothing new. Gisline says the festival is almost over, but nothing's happened, and he wonders if it's because he's with Elena. Jamal then asks if she wants to check out the other areas, and Gisline thinks this might be it. He says, according to a friend of his, there are new events elsewhere, asking if she wants to. And Jamal starts to take Elena away. She says this better be fun. Gisline then says it must have been these two, the traitors of his house, both Jamal and Philip. We learn that Jamal and Philip were the most trusted knights in the feud because they had protected Elena ever since she was a child. It was known that they were murdered while protecting Elena in his past life. But now he knows differently. He decides to follow them. Jamal says, now we're here, showing Elena an empty area in the slums. Elena looks around, asking what this is, saying there's nothing here, and asking if they are sure there will be a performance in such a dirty place. Jamal looks nervous, saying he guesses they are not prepared yet, and he thinks that they will be here soon. She barks at him, saying not to make her laugh and asks who would perform here. Gisline looks around, saying as expected, this may seem like a simple deserted street at first sight, but looking at the placement of the obstacles blocking the escape routes, they must have made preparations in advance. Elena then starts dragging him, saying it's time to go, and Jamal tries to tell her to wait, saying that she should at least see the show since she's already here. She says no, she doesn't want to stay in such a filthy place. Gisline asks if she works out or something, asking why she's so strong, which annoys her. Then Philip stands in her way, blocking her, and makes a very angry expression, saying they should wait a little more. She gets scared by him and says that they are acting strange today, asking what's going on. Jamal says that he's sorry and didn't mean to scare her, and it's just that a reasonable request came in, and he begins to rub his hands together. She asks what he means by request, and then somebody else begins to approach, and he has 2 men with him. His name is Frank, and he says, as expected, their work process is clean. Jamal says of course, and they brought the young lady as promised, so they should end the deal here. Frank then spots Gisline, saying he doesn't think he requested him to be here too, and Elena is clearly scared. Jamal says that he'll hand him over for free, saying he followed them foolishly, not knowing that this would be his graveyard. Gisline then calls Jamal out for selling them, asking if he really thinks he can get away with this. Jamal laughs, asking why he's not worrying about himself instead, saying that all they have to do is run away to a faraway place. They were getting sick and tired of this impoverished land anyways, and he's sure there are plenty of others leaving per diem besides them also. He laughs in a condescending way. Before he can even react, Gisline swings his blade, slicing him across the chest. By the time Jamal realizes, it's too late as he begins to spit out blood. Philip also realizes that they might have bitten off more than they can chew, as Jamal's corpse falls to the ground in two. At the very least, the barbarians never sold them out. Gisline glances back at Philip, unleashing his mana, asking if he agrees. Philip grabs onto Elena, calling Jamal an idiot, asking how a knight could lose to an amateur. Before he can even draw his blade, Gisline's sword gets lodged in his head. Philip says impossible as his final words, and he falls backward, dead on the ground. The henchmen ask if that's really the eldest son of per diem, saying that they're sure he never had any combat training. Frank says, judging by his appearance, he's sure it is. Although they were taken off guard, he instantly killed 2 knights with attacks that used mana each time. Elena hugs onto him while crying, asking what is happening. Gisline realizes what he must do, and he hits her with the "does this rag smell funny" no jutsu, knocking her out. He tells her to take a little rest, putting her to sleep on the ground. Frank thanks him for doing the work for them, saying he's much different than what he heard, and they were planning on taking care of those 2 themselves, asking if he has been hiding his true skills. Gisline asks why it matters to him. Gisline realizes there are going to be 3 of them, but the 2 beside Frank are nothing. Since Frank exudes a lot of mana, he'll have to end this quickly. He forms his mana into strings around his hand. He asks Frank who requested this. Frank says, "Is there a need for a dead man to know that?" Gisline says he knew he wouldn't say it easily, no matter what. The henchman asks if they should cut his head off, and Frank says no. They need to capture him alive and break every limb in his body so that he can't help but go mad. He has to writhe in pain for his shape to come out beautifully. What a freak. Frank's men launch toward Gisline. Gisline pulls out one of the things he prepared from his belt, which is a candle, and he launches it into the air at them. It is a firecracker. I might be a little slow. The guy gets taken off guard, but that's all Gisline needed as he instantly pierces through the firecracker, stabbing the man in between his eyes, killing him instantly. The other man says that was such a shallow trick and comes in for a counter swing. Gisline blocks it behind his back. Gisline then turns to look at the man, wraps his arm around his blade, stopping his movement, then rotates his hips, pulling it backward, instantly following up with a swing, cutting the man's head off. He then senses the next attack coming from above and blocks it behind his back yet again, which surprises Frank as he didn't expect that. As he blocked it in a weird position, it was a perfect sneak attack too. Gisline then pivots off of his foot, rotating his body, slicing at a diagonal upwards toward Frank. Frank narrowly avoids death, but loses his pipe and gets grazed on his throat, and his pipe falls to the floor. Frank goes with an instant follow-up from above, and Gisline uses both swords to block it this time. Frank says he's surprised, and if he was lacking in mana, he would have been beheaded just now. Gisline wonders how he survived a strike to his neck, saying maybe he focused his mana around his neck to reduce the damage. Frank says he has no clue how he learned such a strange swordsmanship at that age, but he is going to die here as he begins to release his mana. Frank begins to imbue his mana into his blade and charges in for another attack, saying Gisline can't beat him with such feeble mana, and it begins to push Gisline back. Frank laughs, saying he will die here. Gisline grins, and Frank wonders what he's smiling at. Gisline rotates his body, deflecting Frank's sword, and stabs his own blades into the ground. Then using the swords for stability, he launches a nasty kick straight to Frank's face. This knocks Frank back a bit, and he says that he already told him that it won't work with that amount of mana. But instantly, Frank starts to spit up blood and falls to the ground on one knee. He wonders what happened, saying the power of Gisline's attack is different. There's no way he should be able to pierce through his enhancement with his skill level. Gisline says he never expected there to be a true culprit behind Elena's death, and he begins to unleash a red mana this time, saying that he's glad he now figured out who it was. He tells Frank to prepare himself as he unleashes his third core. Frank's surprised, asking how he could boost his mana so much, but Gisline isn't here to talk, he's already in his face with both blades. Frank says that he's fast and blocks the first attack, trying to backpedal, but before he can create any distance, Gisline continues with yet another powerful swing. Frank manages to block this one, but Gisline readies his blades, coming in for another big follow-up. This one sounds much heavier than the rest, and Frank's hands begin to shake, saying that his hands are numb from blocking his strikes. His sword also begins to crack, and he says no matter how much mana one draws, it usually has a limited effect. He's never heard of a method that increases mana so explosively like this, and it's as if Gisline has become an entirely different person. Bro is channeling the Mercenary King from his past life. The next swing of Gisline's sword shatters Frank's blade, and we see his fearful expression in the reflection. He then gets sliced across the chest and realizes that he's done for as Gisline rears his fist back, coming in for the final blow, stabbing him through the chest. Frank begins to spit out blood, and Gisline puts his forearm to his throat, pinning him against a wall, saying he'd like to finish their conversation before ending him. He asks Frank who was the one who requested this and begins to twist the blade in his stomach. Frank pulls out a hidden blade, saying he's not going to go down easily and that he'll at least take Elena with him. He flicks his wrist, going to throw the dagger, but we see mana strings wrap around it, and this is what Gisline expected in the first place. Bro was ready for everything, and he says it's time to make a deal. Frank shouldn't try to say anything useless and should answer his questions, and then he'll sheath his blade. Frank says that he can't move because these threads are created with mana and wonders when this happened. He realizes it must have been from the start, understanding he's been played. Gisline then says he's sure someone of his caliber would know how to patch himself up, though that wouldn't matter if he destroyed his mana core, as he begins to imbue his aura into the blade. Frank looks down, scared as he starts to feel a vibrating sensation in his stomach. His core begins to shatter, causing his mana to scatter as we see that happening. Frank asks if Gisline's out of his mind, saying one wrong move in the backflow of mana could cause an explosion and blow this whole area away, asking if he's planning to self-destruct. Gisline says that's for the unskilled, and he can manage it. Frank realizes that Gisline is not bluffing and that he's about that life, as he sees the reflection of death in Gisline's eyes. He screams, saying that it was Count Desmond who requested this and that he needed a pretext to start a war against the Per Diem and Digarda families. Gisline asks if that's so and realizes it now, saying in his previous life, such underground work was left for the families allied with the ducal house. He can't believe that Duke Delphine would do this without even trying to hide it, and he says now he understands why they wanted to kill Elena. Frank pants, saying yes, and then Gisline shoves the blade completely through his stomach. Frank asks what he's doing, saying this is different from what he said earlier. Gisline asks what's wrong, saying Frank's killed plenty of people in his time, yet he's scared when it's his turn. Frank begins to laugh, saying nothing will change even if he kills him. He's already finished the work for Digarda, asking if people would listen to a punk like him, and that Per Diem will perish due to the war. Gisline puts his hand on Frank's face, saying he'd like to tell him something. He says that he was reborn after dying, and he will make sure that it is different this time. He begins to twist his blade more, completely shattering the core of Frank. At the same time, a firework is shot into the sky, and we hear it explode, as that is exactly what happened to Frank. Bro literally painted the walls. Gisline begins to pant and looks around at all the corpses he left behind. He turns his head to make sure Elena is still asleep, which she is, and he sighs out of relief. He drops his blade to the ground, just glad that this shit is finally over. Then he begins to feel the recoil and starts to spit up blood, causing him to fall to the floor. He says exploding 3 cores wasn't an issue at all back when he was the Mercenary King, but he refuses to fall like this. He bursts himself into a nearby house. He says in his previous life they found another body besides Elena, and according to what the guy said earlier about the Digarda family, there must be a clue. Under some debris we see that it is none other than the son of Digarda, dead, and it seems he was killed along with his escort knight. This is how they silenced them and framed them as Elena's killers. The moment this is revealed, the war will start, and he decides to hide the evidence by pulling the firecracker out, burning the place down, saying he will not let it happen as planned. He leaves, carrying Elena while somebody watches from the treetops, vanishing instantly after witnessing it all. We then jump to somebody saying, it was a failure. We see the person who vanished, and they're all talking, saying they sent guard knights as well as Frank, the best they have, yet they couldn't take care of one girl, asking if they let their guards down because they thought it was easy work. The person in the middle says it was all due to Gisline Per Diem. They ask how that makes sense, saying that Gisline is the useless bastard of the north, and they're sure he's well aware that Gisline is a useless piece of shit, asking if he's really trying to use him as an excuse. The person sweats nervously, saying that he was completely different from the information and rumors they have about him. He describes the brutal murders that Ghislaine committed, as well as how skilled he was at defeating all of the enemies without wasting any of his movements, and how he was always a step ahead of them, as if he was a completely different person. But they've already taken care of things with Degarda, so it won't be an issue to start with. They start flaming him, saying that he couldn't even find out information on one kid, asking how much of a setback this was, and they all yell, saying that this guy needs to die right here and now. One person speaks up, calling them all noisy, and the room instantly grows quiet as they all look up at a throne. The man in the middle says that he will personally get rid of Ghislaine per diem. When asked how, he says that he will make a duel happen naturally, and there is someone he has in mind. When they all ask who, he says it's somebody named Cain Logus. He's famous for his strength-based swordsmanship. Despite his young age, he's the epitome of strength, and he confidently tells them that there is no one in the north who has a match for his strength. Plus, Cain is Ghislaine's cousin, so it won't be too forced to have them meet. The man on the throne says that if he fails again, there will be no next time, and his bloodline will end with him. The man says he will not disappoint him. Back at the training hall, Fergus enters, telling Ghislaine that it's approaching mealtime, and as a string of aura flies past him, grabbing Ghislaine's sword's handle off the wall, he looks at it, and it begins to fly straight back toward Ghislaine. He catches it in his hands, blows his breath, and starts swinging around, saying, "That should do." Then he spots Fergus, and Fergus says that he can't help but feel so focused on his training, asking what he did just now. He sees his sword dangling off the thread, and he's using mana like a string. In his past life, Ghislaine used it all the time, but at his current skill level, he needs to implode his core to use it like he used to do to his lacking mana. However, if he just makes one thread to use less mana, he can still have it despite having less. Fergus says he thought he had trained his mana for a long time, but he's never seen anything like this. Just a while ago, Ghislaine didn't use mana, let alone train, so how was he able to come up with an idea like this? Ghislaine cuts his thoughts short, asking if he wanted something. Fergus says he just wanted to stop by to tell him something, and Ghislaine asks what it is. Fergus bows, saying he wanted to thank him for protecting the young lady. Ghislaine asks why he's thanking him, saying it was something he should have done naturally, and they should go eat. A few days later, the festival was paused, but it only made sense as a guard knight tried to traffic the young lady. We see her sitting in her room, pouting, asking why everybody thinks she's lying when she tells them Ghislaine was the one who saved her, and that Ghislaine should go say something to them. Ghislaine says it's fine, as they won't believe him anyway. Belinda is just pissed that Jamal and Philip tried to get rid of her, calling them perverts. Ghislaine says they're just happy that Elena lived, saying he's able to stop the war from happening, but he's sure they won't give up, and he can't stop them on his own forever, so he needs to grow a military force. Another maid enters the room, bringing food, and Ghislaine gets ready for his meal, saying he has to get more into politics to do that. We see a single piece of bread on the plate, and Ghislaine looks down, confused, asking Belinda why they are only getting desserts. She says surely he didn't forget how the situation was. We then hear somebody screaming compensate out the window, and it is a big chungus of a villager, saying they need to be compensated for the damages caused by the cancellation of the festival, and they're barging at the gates. It's a bunch of villagers. The guards try to get them to calm down, and Ghislaine looks out the window, asking what's going on. Belinda says she knew this would happen, and surely he knows that their county is full of merchants who make a living from the profits that come from the festival. It was good enough for them last year, but since the festival was cancelled after only one day, it makes sense they are upset. Ghislaine didn't think that their county's situation was this bad, and he says this isn't good. They will only get more aggressive if he doesn't do anything. He asks Fergus what the soldiers are doing, telling them to go calm the crowd down. Fergus says they don't have any. Ghislaine asks what he means. Fergus says that most of them have been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters, where the orcs came from, for reconstruction because of the raid. Per diem is basically eternally at war because of the barbarians in the north, and on the other side, there is the Forest of Monsters from where the orcs came from originally. Ghislaine clicks his tongue, saying they have no money or soldiers, and this is a mess. He tells Belinda he would like to have a private conversation. He says she's the one who manages his money, and they should use that to calm down the merchants. She laughs, saying there isn't any, and he asks why not. She reminds him that the Count cut off his allowance because he spent money like water. He can't believe he's broke and tells her to lend him money. She tells him she doesn't have any either. Ghislaine sits by the window, saying, "Damn it, I have no money or soldiers," and that he pretty much has nothing. Without even the least amount of money, there's nothing he can do, even if he has knowledge about the future, and he needs to get his money up. He wonders if there is no way, and there's surely something on the estate that's worth a lot. We see Ricardo after a while, calling out to Ghislaine. He asks why he's here in such a hurry, and Ricardo says that there is a problem, as young Master Kane wishes to meet him. Ghislaine is surprised, and we see Scoven all beaten up, only to catch another punch straight to the face, with a follow-up to his armor, causing a huge dent in it. Scoven begins to spit out blood, landing directly in front of Ghislaine. He begins to cry while calling out to Ghislaine. Ghislaine looks pissed, and Kane says, "There he is." Ghislaine looks up at this absolute behemoth, and Kane looks down on him. Bro has some serious cauliflower ear. If you've watched till the end, comment, chess, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.